Hey Elizabeth, I just texted you in chat. Okay, guys. Might as well get going. Kind of a skeleton crew today, huh? Must be the end of the semester blues. Let's see. Okay. So sorry about Wednesday, man. I was super sick. Um, Food poisoning sucks. That's all I'm gonna say. We've all been there. So I'm a little behind on grading, but what I thought we would do is because we have pretty much this week, we have, I think, like 2.5 weeks left in our semester before finals week starts. And so we don't really have a final in our class, like a cumulative final, but we will have a last project, and that will comprise our final assignment. So what I'm hoping to do is to finish out our semester using color, so using the chalk pastels, and then afterwards get into colored pencil. So what I'd like to start out with is, does anybody have any announcements or have anything they want to mention to me in front of the class or anything like that? I'm assuming everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thanks.
Glad you feel better.
Yeah, thanks. It's such a bummer. Um, so, all right, cool. So then today what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce color. I also want to apologize. I didn't end up putting anything up for you guys regarding the profile. I was thinking too, and I didn't jump on it enough, that it would be fun to do like a conceptual self-portrait of some kind, or even just a conceptual portrait, um, if you guys wanted to. And that could be any, it could be like a cubist version or whatever. But if you didn't do the profile, don't worry about it. I'm thinking I'm just going to truncate it into two things for the face, and then also the 3/4 view. So hoping, I'm not sure if I posted that up on Canvas. Again, I'm playing a little bit of catch up this week, but should be squared away by the end of the night. So let me share my screen with you guys. Okay. Well, we can work on that, Elizabeth, when the time is right. So let me do a screen share with you guys. Okay. All right, are you guys all seeing, hopefully you're all seeing, does that look like a color wheel in front of you guys on the screen? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yes.
All right, cool. So I'm going to break into color a little bit. And this is a little bit of a wandering lecture, but I wanted to show you a bunch of images of artists who use primarily pastels in colors. But I wanted to go over some basic terminology when we talk about color. And then also talk about some of the color wheel, and give you guys some kind of orientation. This color wheel right here is, sorry for it's a crummy slide, but the way that this one works is that these are what are called subtractive primary colors. And so, and this might get a little convoluted, but bear with me. And I am recording this, so you can go back and check it out. There are two primary color models that we deal with when we're dealing with art. The first and the most kind of ubiquitous is what's called the subtractive color model. And this is more like physics. So for example, when we paint, or if you use like colored pencils, what's happening is that the sun is shining down on a color or on an object, and the object that you see is actually not the color in actuality. It's not, I mean, well, let me put it like this, and you guys probably already know this, but when the sun shines on an object, and when it appears to us as a green or a blue or whatever, what's happening there is pretty much all objects on Earth, including plants, the ocean, you, me, your clothing, they are energy sponges. And they absorb certain wavelengths of light from the sun, and then there are others that they do not absorb. And when they don't absorb those wavelengths coming from the sun, they kick it back out. So it kind of bounces off of them, like, almost like a wavelength mirror. Now, our eyes are designed to pick up different kinds of wavelengths that are bouncing off of different objects, mainly because the objects in the world are not absorbing those wavelengths of light. So you could argue that when we're looking at the world and we're going, oh, that's a green leaf, or that's a blue ocean, or that's an orange sunset, what we're really looking at is we're looking at the colors that whatever is creating those, that refraction, those colors are actually the bounced back rays and wavelengths of light from the object that it is not absorbing. So the way our eyes pick up stuff is our eyes pick up wavelengths of light that gets bounced back. So, for example, when you're mixing yellow, so when we're talking about what's called a subtractive color model, and the reason why it's called subtractive is that very reason that objects are like sponges, and you could also argue that paints operate a lot like sponges, or even pastels or colored pencils. So when you see a red colored pencil, or when you see the color red, now right now on the screen, we are dealing with what's called an additive color model. And I'll go over that in a minute. And the computer has made that more important for our purposes than in the past. We would just ordinarily, do the subtractive color model. When you're dealing with paints or colors, like with a colored pencil, what you're doing is, think about it like you're laying down color that is almost like a light absorbent thing, and what's being kicked back would be like the red wavelengths that your eyes are picking up. And in that sense, that's why it's called subtractive, because the colors, the light is being absorbed and subtracted from the composite light, as you guys probably know, like from 8th grade or whenever you were in science class, and you put a prism in front of the sunshine. The sunlight is white, and it contains all the wavelengths of every color, and then of course the prism creates a spectrum of them so that we can see them in sort of an order. So the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow in a subtractive color model. So this would be applicable to paint, chalk, colored pencil. If, however, we're playing around with light, like, for example, a digital camera or on the computer, the primary colors there are red, green, and blue. And the red, green, and blue mix to, those are the additive color model, means that the colors like this, you see, so here's red, green, and blue. When the additive color model operates, what happens is the colors of blue and red are added together to create a magenta. When blue and green are added together, it creates cyan, and when red and green are added together, the combination of those wavelengths is yellow. So you can even, if you want to just like flick a little speckle of water on your screen or even on your smartphone, you'll start to see that there are little RGB sensors that are lit at different brightnesses on your device. So I thought I would go over some of the terms of color theory. Sorry for this janky, I kind of borrowed this, been using this for years, and okay. So in a subtractive model, okay, we're dealing with red, the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. And in a subtractive color model, when you add those things together, you get secondary colors. The secondary colors are violet or purple, green, and of course orange, right? Now, depending upon, I'll go over mixing colors in a little bit. Intermediate colors, or also called tertiary colors, are colors that are created by mixing a primary and a secondary color. And then you can, and so there is some kind of an order to it. So if we're mixing a primary color, say of red, a secondary color of like orange, then we get this kind of red orange color. That's kind of, it makes a lot of sense, right? So, or orange yellow. So there are also neutral colors, which we might call like a grayscale. They go from all the way black to all the way white, and then in between are shades of gray. And in a strict color sense, the grays and the blacks and the whites are what you would call like would be black and white or color, or it'd be like a grayscale in like a Photoshop image. So just some terms that you should know if you guys go on to take maybe a painting class or something like that. If you add white to a color, that's called a tint. If you add black to a color, it's called a shade. And if I were to go back to, so the tints are going to be lighter. So as you add white, it's going to get lighter. And as you add black, it's going to get darker toward black. And maybe what I can do, I don't know if, do any of you guys use Photoshop frequently enough that using a Photoshop, that's okay, Asusana, if you're stuck on mute. I was wondering if I could just open up Photoshop for a minute. Well, actually, no, I won't do it because it'll just confuse you guys. Color schemes. So for example, a scheme is just sort of a system of putting colors together. And so when you're working on a drawing or maybe you're working on an art piece, sometimes what artists will do is they'll just pick a scheme, a color scheme, so that they know that there's going to be some kind of a harmony within their artwork that's going to work. Monochromatic would be, somewhat like, say, like grayscale, right? Complementary would mean that you would have like kind of like the Fauves. So I'll show you some of that work later. Analogous colors mean that colors are very similar to one another, and then warm and cool. And I'm going to show you guys today how to go through and identify different types of colors, and the way that I do it, which is using kind of a method where I start asking, what is the color? Is it warm? Is it cool? Is it a tint? Is it a value? And then you can, or a shade, and then you can start to kind of hone in on how to make it. So a monochromatic could be a grayscale, but it means that when there's more or less the same color, like it doesn't divert, there's not really any purples or yellows or any of that kind of stuff in this image, just blues. Complementary colors obviously are going to be, let me go back, by the way. The complement of a color on the color wheel is the color that resides across from it. So the primary colors here would be red, blue, yellow, right? But the complement of blue is not yellow or red, it's orange. Like you think about like the Lakers, for example, LA Lakers, whatever you think of them, they have purple and like an orange blue, so they're playing off of those complementary colors, right? The complement of red is green and vice versa. In fact, it was an old painter's trick before they used paper to plaster big giant billboards where they would paint the signs. And sometimes red, believe it or not, is not a terribly visible color across, say, like a landscape. But green and red, if you put a green, sometimes what the sign painters would do is they would have, like, let's say you have like, come buy a burger or whatever in red letters, but instead of outlining it in black, what they would do is outline parts of it in green, which would be the exact complement of that color. And what happens when you put two complementary colors together is that your eyes seek to try to find some kind of a resolution to those two colors. And in some respects, in some cases, have you ever seen like somebody wearing a certain color, or you've seen an image where the colors seem to almost wiggle against each other? That's where you're playing around with two colors that are complements. Pardon me, guys. Complements. And the complementarity, the purity of that color can tend to kind of mess with the sensors in your eyes, the rods and cones, and then your brain it's basically when those colors kind of vibrate, it's when your brain is not quite able to resolve both. Analogous colors are colors that are usually along in the same neighborhood on the color wheel. So for example, if you, and I'll go back to the color wheel and talk about it again. So over here, this would be like warm colors, right? And so this is one way that I use to try to help you guys identify different colors before you start to draw. We're going to work from some still life images for this next project. And I haven't put it up yet, so I'll put it up this evening. And I have a number of photos and then also some paintings that I will post up for you guys to use your chalk on. So if you haven't got your chalk yet, definitely try and pick up some chalk pastels Wednesday or by Wednesday or over the weekend. But let me know how you're set up. Cool colors are, if we use the color wheel as an organizational strategy, then the cool colors are on one side, the warm colors are on another side. Okay. This is an artist named Odilon Redon, and he was an artist who lived in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and he was part of a group of artists called the Symbolists. He's French, and he was really famous for using chalk pastels in really vibrant, interesting ways. A lot of his subject matter revolved around mythological themes or religious kind of themes, but not religious like in the Renaissance, where you might have kind of a reenactment of, like, you know, I don't know, the Sabine women, or, you know, some kind of biblical thing like the ascension or what, any of that kind of stuff. Usually what he'll do at this point in time for his artwork is he'll invoke the image of a figure who is linked to a spiritual or religious practice. This in particular, and I'll put this up as a PDF for you guys to look at. You can see here that there's kind of a modeling involved, and this is pastel chalk. And what's kind of neat, this is kind of a dulled down image. I've seen these in real life in France, and they're really, really vibrant. They're just unbelievable. So definitely recommend checking them out. The colors, this doesn't even do it justice. When you see it in real life, it's like vibrant and vivid. This is also Odilon Redon. And you can see how he's playing around with the vividness of colors. So if you look at this blue, you look at this red, you look at this sort of green back here, the colors almost kind of like vibrate. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It really is amazing. This is called the Buddha, also Odilon Redon. And I'm going to show you a variety of artists who've used pastel and color, because I kind of feel like paint is also, you know, just like, it's just color. It's color, just a different medium. This is also Odilon Redon. Just look at this, the pure use of color, where the image, where it has a subject matter, but it's almost like the balance of like the subject matter in the painting or the drawing, I mean, it almost sort of looks as important as all the colors in the background. So when I look at this work, I don't go up to it and go, oh, it's just a picture of some people in a boat. Actually, what it to me is talking about is the sky, and I think this is called Flower Sky. He did a lot of floral arrangements, and then he had this whole series of work where he would do the more kind of you know, symbolic kind of pieces. But he has a huge collection of these images where he is doing this kind of beautiful color work with flowers. You guys all probably know Frida Kahlo. I think I talked to you a little bit about her before. There she is with her little pet deer. She, as a young woman, I think she was like 15, she was in a horrible bus accident where some piece of a pipe or something from the bus or something like that went like through her body, and it actually exited out part of her pelvis, which put her in a body cast for a year. And while she recovered, her father had bought her some paints just to pass the time, because she just couldn't move. And so she started, and you can imagine how depressed you get if you're just in a body cast. And this was in like the 19 teens, I think. And she just started painting and started to paint like how she felt, right? And so as when she recovered, or as much as she possibly could have, she became an artist, and along the way met Diego Rivera, who was a very famous Mexican muralist, and did some murals for the United States as well. He was a part of a group called the Three Greats, or Los Tres Grandes, the three biggies, and that was Orozco, Rivera, and I think Tamayo, and they're the three men artists. But you know, she did a lot of work. You could see, actually, let me go back and I'll show you. So here's when she's working on the piece I'm about to show you. So that's how big it is. And there's the finished work. These have titles. I'll put them in the PDF, but they're very narrative. And you can see, like, what was unique about her painting at the time, Diego Rivera was a muralist and a painter, and some of what they focused on, they were friends with a guy named Leon Trotsky. I feel like a sneeze is coming on, guys, sorry. And sorry. The work that they did was very narrative. Means it told stories. It was very linked to history, personal identity, and you can see some of her earlier paintings really address the idea of the body. Like, are we our bodies, or are we what we think? And how is our body linked to other systems, right? And so she painted these really beautiful works that explored. This is you know, the pillar, which was her spine. She had to make sure that her spine was, and all the prickles, and just, so it almost feels like surrealist, but it's really like kind of like what you call like personal narrative. And that was a word. The personal narrative was a kind of work that started to really come up as a contemporary art force in the 1970s, but people have been doing it forever. And keep in mind, what's unique about this is that for almost all of history, the art that was created by painters like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and so on, all the way up until, I'd say, like maybe the early 19th, maybe mid 19th century, the themes that artists would use, this is Odilon Redon again, but the themes that artists would paint or draw were usually limited to biblical themes, at least in Europe, or the themes that were dictated by the powers that be. It could be a leader, it could be Islam, it could be Confucianism, it could be any number of isms, right? But in the 19th century, people began to start looking around and painting each other. And instead of painting these idealized situations about saints, or a political, or sort of a famous like event, like you know, the sinking of the Lusitania or whatever, artists started to paint their own personal representations of their own personal psychology and their own personal relationships, say, with things like spirituality or peace or war or whatever. So the role of this is an artist named Puvis de Chavannes, and he is also a symbolist, a contemporary of Odilon Redon. Very, like, they had a lot of kind of visual tropes that they used, the symbolists, to evoke something that was more eternal, and less linked only to, say, like biblical themes, religious themes, political themes. Vincent van Gogh, same kind of idea, late 1800s. As an artist, you know, this is a time where, you know, the industrialization of Europe, the United States, and the colonial occupation of much of the rest of the world, as the sort of global economy started to kind of create itself, if you want to say it like that. Artists in particular, I'll talk about Western Europe in this lecture. Artists began to do a whole lot of different things, but one of the things that freed them up was that there was a broader availability for paint. So paint and materials were not as exclusive as they once were, and artists were able to access more materials. Things were more affordable. Colors were becoming more varied, and also the subject matters that they painted became more local. And so this is also Van Gogh. And we mostly know him for like sunflowers and stuff like that, but he started out early doing drawings of peasants and everyday people. And that was a real shift because one of the things, this is an artist named Paul Klee. Um, I'll talk about him in a moment, but one of the things that artists were doing in the 19th century, we're talking like 1800s, right? Was to start to move away from general themes and start to move into themes that had more of a political bent. So you might think like, oh, there's just some guy sowing seeds, right? But keep in mind that the artwork up until say like the 19th century in most places, even longer, really stuck to the big picture items like God, religion, power, or mythological themes that were far enough away from everyday life that art was really seen as this sort of like a deliverance from the everyday toil of life. But artists in the 19th century were saying, well, wait a minute, if let's say this meaning thing's really out there, let's say that like, you know, that if we paint meaning of saints and all this kind of junk, yeah, he's definitely interesting dude, Vincent van Gogh. He, you know, one of the things that they were refocusing on was, well, if human beings are in some ways some, you know, mirror of the great beyond, then why wouldn't we paint ourselves? Why wouldn't we not just famous people or kings or saints or any of that kind of stuff? Why don't we just paint everyday people? Like, wouldn't it make sense that since there's this mirror thing going on with God and if whatever you want to call it, and the world below us, that could it be that there's beauty in everyday stuff? There's beauty in, this is Paul Klee, in imagination and rhythm, right? He worked for, he was there was a school called the Bauhaus in Germany in the 1920s. And this is also Paul Klee. I'm kind of jumping around, but Paul Klee was a teacher at a school called the Bauhaus, and the Bauhaus was an experimental art school in Germany, where they were really trying to figure out, like, can we merge beauty, meaning, and function in an economically feasible way for most people? So, for example, they had furniture design, they had fabric arts, they had ceramics, they had all this different kind of stuff that they were really focusing on. And it was kind of, and the way that the educational model went was it was really rooted in the idea first, and then kind of applying materials to it later. But concurrent with the education, this is a little bit different than arts education now, is that there was a real focus on teaching people how to do stuff first, like how to draw, how to do ceramics, how to do this, how to do that. And then as your hands became more fluent in the making of things and drawing of things and painting of things, that later then the idea part would be more focused on, like, what do you care about? Like, what are you interested in? And that way, so for example, I was thinking about like doctors, and or this is also Paul Klee, you guys, I'm going to show you some more. I was thinking about doctors, and I remember talking to one time I was in the hospital with some help visiting a friend, and kind of asking questions, and he says, well, you know, what you have to understand is that doctors, like, because I was talking about how we don't really understand like what's going on and why does it seem so distant and da da da. And finally was one guy said something really interesting. He's like, you know, when you start medical school or any kind of a school, like, even think about it, like, this is called Ancient Sound by Paul Klee, who was also a musician. The doctor guy said, you know, like, let's say you're like a chemist, or like, you know, you're a geneticist or whatever, like, they have their own language. And so for example, like, I had a stomach ache the other day. I looked online, what's wrong with me? Am I going to die? Like what most of us do. So I went on Google and I looked up the anatomy of, like, you know, your gastronomic anatomy. And there was a picture of the stomach, and there were all these kind of crazy words that identified all the bits of the stomach. And then I started to look up what the crazy words meant. And it was just like upper stomach, lower stomach, medium stomach, you know, like, but they just had to create their own language to talk about it. So in the same respects, the Bauhaus artists, one of the beliefs in that art education was, if we can teach people the new visual language, which also includes sort of that tactility, like hands, right? Then you could also think it would be also almost like you're teaching somebody a new language. And with that new language, you can begin to think and you can begin to conceptualize with the tools that you have, right? Okay. And this is Ingrid Garten. She was a colorist. This is Paul Klee. Just showing you, this is Paul Signac, who was Paul Serrault, Georges Serrault, sorry, not Paul. And Serrault was a pointillist painter. I think this is Serrault too. And these are all made with dots. This is Artemisia Gentileschi. Sorry, guys. Artemisia Gentileschi. This is a female Renaissance painter. And this is The Death of Holofernes. A different painting, yeah. So a lot of times in the Renaissance, the color schemes of these paintings are very similar. And part of that had to do with the availability of different kinds of colors, right? This is Matisse, right? So if we go from the Renaissance here to Matisse, Matisse is using pure color and pure shapes right on the edge of kind of identifiability. Now, I went over Cubism with you guys, and I had a class called Matisse and Picasso, and they were contemporaries. Picasso and Braque were going after, at the time, this is when we're going after kind of a language of abstraction, where they were looking at Cubism, and they were really kind of trying to figure out a visual honesty that they could bring to bear upon the world when they were painting. Matisse had a different point of view about that same conundrum, and it had to do with color and form. Matisse spent a lot of time I think in Morocco. And one of the things that once you start to kind of think about that, and you start to think about Islamic architecture, oftentimes what is not there is also as important as what is there. So for example, if you look at, say, like even in Japan, you can have there's those beautiful wooden screens, not shoji screens, but they're those woven kind of wooden screens, and I'm forgetting what they're called. But there's a real interplay between what is not there and what is there. And so Matisse was starting to play around with that idea of the balance between space and then materiality. So like if you look here in this picture, down here you have these sort of voids, which we understand are seeing through the chair, right? And then beyond into a window. But then also he has this kind of thing going on where, much like the Cubists, he's sort of flattening space out for us to look at. This is an artist named Jackson Pollock. This is a really close-up of one of his paintings. He was an artist who lived, I think I showed you a little bit of his work, but he was an artist who lived in the early part of the 20th century. He became really famous for drip paintings. This is a terrible slide. I'm going to keep going. That's Alice Neal. I don't know why I have that in there. This is Moreau is the guy's name. He was also a symbolist. You can see like this is a very different, like whereas in the Renaissance you would have like angels and stuff kind of flying around with their robes everywhere, and you can see things have taken a decided shift here. I don't remember who. This is Renoir, and he was one of the Impressionists. Again, I'm hopping around. This is the late 1800s. What's unique, I'm sure you guys have probably seen Renoir, but what's unique about like the 19th century, which I think kind of made a real shift in the way that artists operated, was the changing of the focus from the grand story, the big story, the historical, the religious, to the micro story. So paying attention to the everyday beauty of just hanging out. And so in some respects, it's almost like you almost get like these sort of like photographic documents of a particular slice of time. And so one of the, like, whereas say where you have the Cubists asking, you know, how do we honestly represent a world in two dimensions that never sits still? The Impressionists were saying, how can we honestly represent the fleetingness of life, the fleetingness of the beauty of color and light? So for example, when you're watching a sunset, or you're watching the light fade as it, you know, like sometimes in my backyard, I just go out and the light is really gorgeous at night and I just sit and watch it go. But it doesn't stay like that. It's always changing. And so just as where the Cubists were trying to get as much kind of still in a world that always moves and thinking about space, the Impressionists were thinking about that slice of life moment of capturing the beauty of the everyday. This is an artist named Marie Cassatt, and she was also an Impressionist, and she focused more on domestic mothers and daughters, women, whereas the men in the group were doing landscapes and, you know, horse races and junk like that. This is also Marie Cassatt. And just think about the color, like look at how beautiful these colors are. And also, let me go back. When we look at a color scheme, what's really interesting and beautiful about a lot of these paintings is that they have a coherence beyond simply just their composition. There's also a coherence and kind of a rhythm that flows from using colors that are tonally similar in this way, right? So it is believable. If I go back to the Matisse, even these have a tonal similarity, right? There's nothing really bumping out. I'm going to show you some Fauvist work later where you will compare this. But even the yellow and the blues and the reds in this have a kind of mutedness to them. Jackson Pollock also. And so you can kind of get that there's a coherence of warmth, right? That you could say about this green, this is a warm green, it's a warm yellow. This is a warm pink, like a salmon pink it might be, right? Same with this. Another, Marie Cassatt's paintings are gorgeous because they're just like these quiet moments, you know? The in-between times, which is kind of how I like to think about it. The stuff that nobody thinks is very photographic. Is also Marie Cassatt. Marie Cassatt. Now check this out. So this is a little bit different. She has kind of a cool yellow here, and then there's also dominantly cool colors. I'll go over cool and warm colors more. This is Piet Mondrian. Piet Mondrian was very absorbed into a philosophy called theosophy, and theosophy was a little bit of a blend of some of the scientific understandings of the world, symbolic understandings, and so his paintings, you may have seen some of these before. Some of the paintings will have these blocks of color, and each one of the verticals, the horizontals, and the colors all had symbolic meaning. I have no idea what that is. This is Dorothea Tanning. She was a surrealist painter. I'm just showing you all kinds of cool stuff. Also Dorothea Tanning, I think. This is Sonia Delaunay. Her husband became really famous for very similar paintings. This is a guy named Joseph Albers. I didn't finish talking about Paul Klee in the Bauhaus, but Joseph Albers was another teacher at the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was an art school in Germany in like the mid-20s, and that was at a time when Hitler and the very right-wing party of political party, I forgot what they're called, the National Socialist something party, which basically became the Nazis, started to gain power. And they wanted to make sure they were moving obviously more toward a hyper nationalist, and then also xenophobic, and then racist ideology. A number of the artists in Bauhaus were not following the rules, and Walter Gropius, who was in charge, had to just kind of float this whole school along against the Nazis, but he had to kind of play it safe because I think it only lasted like 6 years or something, and it's one of the most influential art schools around that there people look at, where there was a systematization of again, like the hands and the mind, and it was looked at as instead of an old academy education, it was a new way of thinking about teaching art. Joseph Albers was a color theorist and a painter in the Bauhaus, and one of the things that he did, these are called homage to the square, And he's done like, I don't even know how many of these kinds of paintings. They're not very big, but believe it or not, each one of these squares is meant to be looked at sort of in phases. So for example, it has to do with color relativity. And the color relativity, so for example, if I just sort of block my eyes out and look at this part, I can look at the color relativity of the weight of this, this, and this in their same intensities across. If I vary the intensities, right? So if it's bigger, you can start to look at the difference in the way that the colors change depending on what's adjacent to it. So he did a whole series of squares where he could look at how color changes based, one color can change how it looks based on another color. I'm sure you guys have probably seen things like that online, where stare at the green dot and then you take your eyes away. But colors can look completely different when they're next to other colors. Whereas if I were to take this square out and just put it on a black field, it would have a different presentation to your eye. Because what Joseph Albers figured out, and also what the Impressionists figured out, was that color has a relativity. So that certain colors will look more or less intense based upon the other colors that are around them. And not only that, and this is what Joseph Albers was doing with the Homage to the Square, not only will different colors look differently or appear differently when up against a different color, they will do so in varying degrees based upon the amount of color. So if you have a little bit of red and a big bunch of orange, that red will have a different kind of appeal or a different visual. Your eyes will be seeing the same color, but your brain will be thinking it's slightly different. This is Moreau. So Hesiod, these are Greek myths. So remember that the symbolists were these artists who were mixing both the kind of biblical and ancient Greek mythology. I think this is Robert Rauschenberg, but I don't know. I have to look at my notes, guys. I don't see my notes. This is Matisse. Now this is, remember when I was talking about colors that were kind of analogous, or that they were a scheme, or that they were tonally around the same? Matisse starts to play around with colors that really started to, Matisse was a guy, and this is about 1880s. Matisse was a guy, a painter, who started to use colors in ways that were unconventional. And the French, he started a group of artists called the Fauves. And the Fauvism just meant these sort of wild beasts, right? Because the colors were just so gaudy and so crazy to their eyes. To us, we're like, oh, no big deal. But back then, when you're used to seeing a bunch of gray, kind of Renaissance type colors and a bunch of saints walking around in their robes, this was like completely out of whack. It almost bordered on pattern as opposed to space, like using two dimensions to represent a three-dimensional space. And so in this case, the three-dimensional space is implied. It's not represented per se, it's signified, which means that, like, so for example, you look at this thing here, you understand that as a three-dimensional decanter of some kind, maybe of wine or juice. But in fact, like, just there's no real use of shadows to indicate any kind of a space. The only thing that's being used here are these flat shapes that we read as something. And that's different than trying to trick the eye using shadows. The other thing I wanted to point out is that color scheme wise, tonally, these are more or less kind of similar. However, there is some intensity difference, right? So when you look at how much red is on there, it makes that blue really pop. Another trick that sign painters would use, I love this painting. I think this is a girl with the green eyes. This is also Henri Matisse. Just look at how these colors vibrate off of each other. So it's not real common that you're going to get artists who up until this point would push these really beautiful primary colors against their complements, tertiary complements and stuff like that. So where the Cubists were playing with space, Matisse is also playing with space, but he's using color to really go for it. This is also Matisse. And this is more of the Fauvists. And what the Fauvists would do, they would invert colors. This is an artist named Claude Monet. And he was an impressionist. and an impressionist. The impressionists were a group of artists that were around from like 1840 to 1870s or so. And I was talking about them before, where they were artists who were trying to capture the light, the moment, right? And so this is a cathedral. I think this is Chartres Cathedral. This is one version of Monet's. This is another version. So what the reason why they're kind of like blurry or more kind of daubed is because they were kind of invented this way of painting called en plein air, which is just means outside. And they would literally take their canvases outside and their paints set up, and usually up until that point, artists wouldn't go out necessarily and just that would be their final. That would be like a color sketch. So for example, if I was, let's say I was a painter of horses, I might go to like a corral or something like that, or I might go find somebody with horses and I might just spend the afternoon drawing horses. I take the drawings back to my studio, and then I would refine the drawings, and then I would refine the light and all that kind of stuff. But the Impressionists went out, and they went out to actually to try to record what they were seeing at that moment, and that was the artwork. Here's another version. So you can see these are all different times of day. I suppose if you lived there and you had seen this church change colors in different lights, you might even be able to guess what season it was. There's another piece by Moreau. Pissarro was another of the Impressionists. And again, here he is out. It's winter. It looks like these are the shadows. Oftentimes they would plant these trees called poplar trees as windbreaks. They still do that. Like if you guys drive through Central Valley, California, you'll drive by some like farmland, and there, you guys ever see those big giant trees that are growing along one side? Those are windbreaks. This is Alice Neal. Again, using color, using the human body, a pregnant woman. This is Matisse. Again, I'm kind of jumping around, but look at how bold the color is there. And this is Monet. So this really borders on, this is the same boathouse that we just saw. It's like a cafe that's out on a river or lake. That's the same one that we saw with Renoir, where all those people were having drinks. This is the same thing, just a little different point of view and much quicker. So one of the goals of this painting was to really capture this like beautiful kind of maybe early morning or like early afternoon light. No, this is not blurry. It's in focus, and this is an artist named Mark Rothko. Mark Rothko was a painter who lived in the not early, but like mid 20th century. He became famous in like the 40s, 50s, and 60s for doing paintings. He was part of a movement of art called the Abstract Expressionists. And the Abstract Expressionists were a group of artists who did two types of large paintings. One style was called the color field painters, of which Rothko was a member. And the other groups were called the action painters, of which Jackson Pollock with the drip paintings, Willem de Kooning and others were there. And so Mark Rothko experimented with huge layers of different thin oil paint. And what he was trying to do was kind of ultimately get the most abstract painting that he could, but also communicate some kind of emotion. These paintings are big. They're like 4 feet by 6 feet, or like, 8 feet by 6 feet. They're huge. And they're really meant to sort of almost be like a room, like where you walk in, you stand in front of it and you're looking at these colors. And over time, they kind of start to create their own environment. And a lot of times people go to see these paintings and they have some kind of religious experience. I don't know, I haven't quite had that yet, but they are very beautiful to look at and just be in the presence of. The other thing that's really key to these is their scale. I think that if these, like for example, this piece right here is quite large. It's at least as tall as I am, and like, which is like 6-7 feet tall. And when you see something that big, it's really, it leaves an impression. If this were like a small piece, it might look more like a paint chip, that you might get at the paint shop for painting your bathroom or something. So scale also plays a really important role. This is another Mark Rothko. And this is a terrible slide, so I'm gonna get, but most of these slides are terrible because it's just really difficult to capture. You can see there's a lot of artifacting in this one, but they are mostly just fields of color. And as a counterpoint to that, you might have somebody like Mondrian, who, again, that Theosophist painter who was doing these kind of grids. This is called Broadway Boogie Woogie. And again, like each, and I think this is, I don't know what this represents. It could be the lights of the street or the lights of streetcars or cars coming down the, but it's not representational in the sense that we're used to. This is an early P.A. Mondrian. Looks like it's from 1918. This is Odilon Redon. He became really famous for making this little blobby spider guy. So sometimes, like, there's an artist named Larry Pittman. I didn't put any of his work in here, but it's really amazing. I'll show you some next time. But he's an LA artist and uses really cool, like, color patterns. Maybe I can bring it up for you guys afterwards. The Death of the Gravedigger. Again, this is Matisse. I think we can probably, you guys are probably bored by now, but I can go through this and I can put it into our lecture, but I'll go through quickly. I just wanted to show you kind of like a little bit of a closer look at Odilon Redon and how some of the early drawings that he did, developing his own like language. And that's the thing, like if some of you guys are going to go on to, continue with art, if you're an art major, one of the benefits of making more drawings, making more work, even if you don't think it's good, like not every piece has to be a masterpiece. Most of the time when you do work, you're kind of developing a language, a visual language of your own. So over time, Odilon Redon starts to develop a real kind of a habit of representing things that becomes his style. I mean, every single one of you guys have your own style. At this point, I can almost look at your drawings and guess whose it is, because everybody's hand has its own kind of signature mark. I can imagine that over time, he started to become really fascinated with the way colors can have a spatial dimension. So if you were to look at this on your screen, I realize we have different screens, but the color, this Carillion blue right here, this blue here, this purple, the red, and even some of this turquoise here, if you sort of blur your eyes a little bit, you'll notice that it kind of pops forward out of the picture. And then there are other colors that kind of recede, visibly recede, and you can see some of these, the yellows and the oranges back here kind of receding a little bit. So he's starting to develop a pictorial language of color that has some relationship to colors that recede, like say this kind of muddied color here, back here, and colors that pop forward, like the base, some of this orange, this white, and this kind of pale blue-gray. This is also Redon. This is all the same artist. So again, looking at this color here, look at how it pops forward. This is probably more like what it would look like in real life. I just boosted the color to try to get it so that it would work. Really amazing. And you realize he's just using chalk. And one of the things I think that became really fascinating about Degas and also him is that it took him a while to figure out how he fused down his chalk. There's this stuff called spray fixative that you can use. I don't have any to show you guys. I'll have to buy some. I think I left it at the art studio at school. But chalk pastel is very fugitive. It's going to kind of come and go. And over time, what'll happen as you work with the chalk is you'll realize that your paper can only absorb so much chalk because there's chalk already on it. In which case you have to seal that chalk and sort of create almost like a separate surface. And I'll show you guys how to do that on Wednesday. But these are just some of I just thought I would show this because these are the colors that, this is a subtractive color model, right? This is Paul Signac, and he was a Fauvist. And one of the ways that he started to play around with color was creating these. This is Theo van Riesenberg. These are Fauvists, and they started to play around with this compositing of colors. So instead of drawing out like the cliff or whatever, what they would do is they would compose or build the drawing with pure color. So they weren't putting down a sketch and then going at it. They were literally creating the thing as its finished, form as they were going along. So it was kind of going against some of those norms that we've been taught, which is like if you do a sketch and then you kind of work it, you erase, you go back. Well, these guys are just like, it's screw it, we're just going to go for it. But beyond that, what the Fauves did was they would invert color. So, for example, like they would use the complement color of the shadow. So if, for example, if we inverted these colors, this might actually have been a dark green on the river, right? And this, so we can, if you started to invert the color. So what the Fauves did was instead of painting what they saw, they painted the inverse of what they saw. I think this is an artist named Vlaminck. And so the colors are not meant to represent reality. The only thing that they were really meant to represent was the energy that they were vibing from that particular space. So what I thought I'd do today is have you guys, you can do it with me or you can watch this later and do it at a later time. But what I wanted to do is address some of the shortcomings of your guys's chalk kits. So if I can ask you guys to get out like a sheet of paper, it could be newsprint. The brighter the paper, the better. Usually when I'm dealing with chalk, I like to have a sturdier paper. I'm going to share my screen differently here. Okay. So now I have a box of pastels that I bought a while back. I usually bring these in class and share them. Pastels can cost any variety of pricing. Probably the kits that I had you guys get are ran anywhere from like $12 to $25. This one I think ran like over 160. But one thing I wanted to address was that when you buy a kit of any kind, there's always going to be some shortcomings unless you're going to drop a bunch of money on your color pastel kit to get all of the colors that you need. And so one of the things I would like you guys to do with your kit is this. I want just, and we'll do this with the colored pencils as well when we get to it next week, or yeah, like next week. So I thought what we could do is create kind of a color wheel with, and this is by way of you getting to learn the kit that you have. And we can start out with red here, blue here, and yellow here. And those are your primary colors, right? Orange is here, right? Yellow and blue is green. Blue and red is violet, okay? And then orange and yellow this is more. So as we move this way, we get more yellow. As we move this way, we get more orange. We move from orange to red, red to violet, violet to blue, blue to green, okay? And then green to yellow. One of the ways of thinking about color is that these are more or less considered the cool colors, and over here, these are considered the warm colors. Now, in my kit, I have all kinds of different colors, and I usually bring my kit to class to share with students because most people can't afford or don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on chalks like I do. But I have a variety of different reds. And so what I'd like you guys to do now or at some point is I'd like you to create like a color wheel where you try to identify the purest red that you have. Now, in my case, I have a number of different reds. So I have this kind of a pure, it's going to get everywhere also, guys. So be sure when you do this that you've got like some kind of piece of paper down or something, because it can get really dusty. So there's my red chalk, okay? But I also have a different kind of a red that I can use. It's got a little bit of more darkness to it. You can't, it's hard to see, but it's got a little bit of a darkness. So what I wanted you to do today with the kits that you have is to create a specific color wheel that reflects the colors that are available in your kit. Okay, now check this out. In the middle, there's going to be white. I don't know if I have any more white chalk left. What does that look like? Is that white? Okay, so this is my white. Not terribly. Oh, sorry, this is called deep yellow. Who'd have thought? Yeah, I think a lot of my chalks have gone used up, which is okay. But if you were to put, say, you could put white in the middle here, and then you could have black out here. These are going to be your shades, and these are going to be your tints. Okay. So if I add blacks to a color, it's going to get less saturated, is the right way to say it. It's not going to get darker, it's going to get less saturated. And as we add white, it's going to get brighter. So sometimes, so what I'd like you guys to do is try to figure out, like, let's say I have an orange. The orange in my kit looks like this. But let's say the orange in my kit looked like this, much brighter. And that was the only orange I had. So this, as I put this down, I noticed that this color right here, it looks like a red orange. And this one looks like pretty much a pretty solid orange, right? What I'd like you guys to do is to pick some colors, like let's say I have a chartreuse color, right? A chartreuse color is usually going to be like over here, because that's where yellow and green meet, right? So I want you guys to try to figure out where would these colors go? So like this is a funky one. It's this almost like this, like it's a cool color. So one of the ways that I try to identify a color in something is I first ask, looking at the color, right? If I look at this color, what do you guys think? So let me just make I'm gonna make we'll do like a little exercise, okay? So I'm gonna put a color down right here. Okay. Now, if you were to look at this color, would you say it's a warm color or a cool color? You guys can just chime in or put it in chat. Definitely warm. Now, even though it's a yellow, you think always yellow is warm. There are yellows. This is a yellow green. Now, what about this? Does that look like a cool color or a warm color? In terms of, it's a yellow green, but greens, yellows, and oranges and reds can also be cool, right? So reds that are more toward purples are cooler. Reds that are more toward orange are warmer, right? So this is a green. Where is it going? Is it going more towards yellow, or is it going more towards green? What do you guys think?
My guess is on green.
Yeah. What about the color of it? So does it seem like it has more white in it or more black in it? In terms of its brightness.
I'd say it has a lot more white to it.
Yeah.
It's a little more brighter.
Yeah, so if I were to put this, if I had a yellow green, I would want to put that in my chart like over here, because I'm adding white to it, right? But now I've got this really dark green, and it's kind of it's got a little bit of blue in it, and it's kind of dark. So I'm going to put it out here. it's got a real dark kind of a greenness to it. Okay, I have kind of a lighter green, maybe like over here. It's getting toward white, right? So you see, I'm trying to. So these are the chalks that I have. So this one's going more toward darkness. This one's kind of in the middle, and then maybe this one is much lighter. Okay, you guys see? So what I would like you guys to do, if this makes sense, let's say you have a blue. Okay. I'd like you guys to take your chalks and create a color wheel where you try to locate the blue. So if you just make a blue dot, right? You can ask yourself, is that a warm blue or is it a cool blue? Now, cool blues can also go this way, right? So if I had more white in it, it might be a cooler blue. This is kind of a warm blue. I'll put another kind of color next to it. This one actually probably should go right there. And also it's got a bit of violet to it too. So I would probably move it over there. But what I'm trying to get you guys to do is to look at the colors that you get in your kit and put them on a chart. The main reason I want you to do this is because when you get a small kit of colors, you're gonna only have certain colors of certain like primaries. And by the way, this is how the companies try to get you to buy more stuff, is they won't give you a pure red, they'll give you something that looks like this. Okay, and you're like, shoot, I really need a red that looks like that, but I don't have it in my kit. Usually you'll get a little bit, you can get a little bit closer. Here's a brown. Let me see if I can get some of my yellows. Here's a nice yellow. Okay. And trying to find a nice violet color. This is kind of a lighter violet color. It's a little bit, you know, it's not as vibrant as I'd like it. There's my violet, right? And so what you guys will notice is that in the kits that you have, you're going to have maybe like 3 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues. Like they're really kind of, depending on the kit that you got, you're going to have some random kind of supplies. And there's no real way to create all the colors if you have some slightly off primaries. So that's the first step I'd like you guys to do, and that's just going to locate your colors, right? So as you try to identify colors in your kit, what I'd like you guys to do is, and even if you just want to, you can just go ahead and put the color down and then just look at it and go, is it a warm orange or is it a cool orange? Is it a cool purple or is it a warm purple? A cool purple would go towards blue and a warm would go towards red. Okay. So if I have a bluish, so if I have a reddish purple, right, is going to be like a magenta. And then if I have something that has more blue in it, I'm going to get much deeper purple. See? So this is kind of your homework for now. I'm going to put up your the assignment, and I'm going to have you guys do just a still life on a sheet of paper. And the goal of this of looking at your still life will be, and let me bring up one of the photos so that you guys can see what I'm going to ask you to do. So I'm going to put up some images like this for you guys to see. So let's look at, if we look at this image right here, overall, if you could just give me an impression, what do you guys think? Is this, are the colors, is the overall color scheme warm or cool, or maybe a combo? Yeah, warm. Even the blue's kind of warm, but over here, check this out, this kind of turquoise color. That turquoise color is like a little bit cool. So there are some cool colors. So one of the first things I'll have you guys do before you even start drawing is to identify, are these warm colors? Are they cool colors? Yeah. So as we start looking at this, now what I'll have you guys do in the exercise is you guys can go ahead and kind of sketch in with a pencil if you want, the still life. And I have a variety of other photos for you. Some of them are somewhat boring like this, but you can see how muted the colors are in this one. Let me see if I can bring up the other guys. Or if you guys want, you could find your own. I was thinking if any of you guys wanted to do like you know, something from a movie, you could do that. It doesn't really, you know. So this is Monet. I was thinking of having you guys put in some, you could do Monet. We could do still life of bottles, and then some flowers, and then also like this. So if I were to draw this, I'm gonna try to give it my best in terms of just trying to get the color of this vase. What I'll do is, let me put this in, I'll put this vase, you guys, in the chat, and then I will attempt to, can you guys, is that thing in there, or is it like, let's see. Can you guys make, is that photo showing up in chat, or is it just like a weird, let's see if I can get it to go. Hopefully it'll show up. Okay, so in the chat, you guys can open that up. And what I'll do is I'm going to do a quick share, and I'm just going to kind of show you a quick way that I use to try to approximate color. Okay, so let me get a fresh sheet of paper. Now, I guess the reason I'm asking you to, the reason that I'm asking you to make a color wheel with your pastels first is because you may end up becoming a little bit frustrated trying to find the right colors for the drawing that you're doing, because your kit just might not have those colors to begin with. So if you guys want to look in chat and open up that quick photo real quick, and I'll see if, now there's all kinds of factors. There's like the color space of your monitor, there's the ambient color here, the color of my lamp, and all that kind of thing. But what I'm going to try to do first is I can go in here. I just want to try to get the color of this bottle down. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just start out with a kind of a neutral color. There's the orange there. And I usually go from light to dark. And because I'm dealing with warm colors, it's pretty safe for me to just go ahead and block in some yellow here, because I can go back over it. And now luckily I have some colors. If I were to use this color, you know, so when I'm looking at my photo and I'm looking at the chalk I have, this color isn't really there at all. But this color kind of is. Maybe I can peel it off for you guys. This color kind of is there, but it still has a little bit too much green in it. So what I'm gonna, and also there's all these different facets inside the bottle itself. So the first thing I'll do is I'll identify on this image here, and let me try to zoom in on it for you guys. I'm going to look at this in 1, 2, and 3 areas. And as I kind of look at that, I notice that there's a little bit of purple and gray in it. And so maybe what I can start out doing is just finding a really light, kind of a light gray. And I know you guys are thinking there's no gray, but I just want it to be a little bit muted. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shoot in a little bit of color here, shoot in some here. So what I'm trying to do, what I do in my drawings is I try to sneak up on the color. In other words, I'm slightly non-committal at first, just so that I can get an idea of the typical color that I'm going after. Now I realize there's not that much gray, but I'm going to use this this kind of a super light yellowish color to start moving in some of this color here. So when I start combining the white over that dark blue, I can blend it with my finger a little bit. I mean, I'm just keeping it light because it's easy to overload your paper, and then at a certain point, that's when you're going to need some fixative. I'll grab some fixative for next time, and I'll show you guys how to do that on camera. Now, you might think that's totally off. It's a little bit too green. When I look at it in the camera, it looks a lot too green. And if I were to blur my eyes a little bit on that, I do see a lot of kind of almost like a grayish purple in this area. So I'm going to try to find a very weak purple that I'm seeing. I don't think I'm gonna have time to finish this, but I just wanted to try to. Do you guys see that little bit of purple? If you blur your eyes a little bit, I kind of am seeing like a grayish purple color. It does have a lot more blue in it. Maybe that's my monitor, and also it's very subtle. So thus far I'm using this color. I used a little bit of this color and this color. So I'm trying to build up this shade that I'm noticing in this area here and this area here. This one in the middle, it has almost like has a little bit of green to it. And I know you might think I'm not seeing green at all, but if you start to blur your eyes and you start to ask, because in general, we look at the bottle and we go, oh, it's a bluish bottle, right? But the closer you look, the more you'll realize that that bluish bottle isn't really blue at all. It's a combination of different dark bluish greens and grays, magentas and purples are in there too. So I'm just going to start to build in this color. I'll see if I can more or less get this bottle. Maybe I should start with the orange, which would have been a little bit more doable. I'll kind of put in the rest here. I usually try to stay away from black, but I usually just use a little bit of black just to kind of darken things a little bit. But I usually don't use black very much because it just tends to just completely overpower everything. So I'm just tapping a couple bits of black on there. See if I can zoom in. So you see, I'm really just taking it slow and I'm trying to iron out. And all the while, what I'm doing, you guys, is I'm asking like, is it cooler or is it warmer? Is it more green, more blue, more purple, more this, right? So I'm gonna pull some of this black over here because I did notice that the colors of this bottle are pretty muted. They don't look really vibrant. They just look kind of muted. And now keep in mind, I'm not going for realism right now. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get color. So I sort of feel like, it's funny because the camera's picking up a lot more of the marks. It looks totally different in real life than what it looks like on the screen. Okay, so I'm kind of getting there, right? So if I compare this to the photo, if you guys have the photo up, you'll see that that's getting there, right? Okay. And then also there's that little bit of the orange here, which kind of comes up like that. And then that has ever so slight, this kind of orangey color there. And I can use my finger to kind of blend that through. Just went right over the yellow. So that's why I start with the light colors first, because I can just go right over the lighter colors. Um, it looks way lighter on my end, but I can also come back in here. It looks redder on my screen than it does on my paper. But I'm using my yellow. Sometimes you can use the lighter colors to blend. Okay. So I'm going to come back in here, and so when I'm looking at the bottle on the image, and I compare this to the bottle that's on my screen, it looks like this is a little bit too warm. So I need to kind of cool it off a little bit. So I've got this, it looks like my screen is, or my camera is skewing a little bit toward red. I'm looking for a brighter blue. Here's a lighter, kind of a cooler blue. And I think that should really help out. Yeah. That I think is a little bit too bright. There, it's looking more like it. In fact, it even gets deeper than that. And I could start playing around with some even deeper colors, but this blue might be a little bit too vibrant even for that. So the nice thing about pastels is you can just use a little bit, use your finger to blend. You can also just use the colors in your kit and just kind of experiment. And then when you feel like and don't even draw anything, don't even try to draw anything, just start experimenting with the colors, see what kind of colors you can get from the existing colors that you have. Also, it's fine to just go ahead and buy some at, you can buy them individually at the art store. Okay. So, you can tell my style is kind of a little bit, let me go back out so you guys can see. My style is a little bit scribbly. That's just my style. Everyone's got their own. Some people are super fastidious. Mine's a little scribbly. Get my orange some life here. And little green there. Add a little white in there too. And then I can start playing around with the white. See. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of I'm mixing and matching the colors. So the first step that I do, you guys, is I ask, okay, where is this color? Is it cool? Is it warm? Is it more green? So for example, if you have a blue green or if you have a green blue, you have to make a decision. And the decision that's important is this green more toward blue or is it more toward yellow? And that's going to help you identify where to begin in terms of getting your colors onto your page. So if I say, well, this is a green that's got more yellow in it, I might just lay down some yellow first, like I did here. So this orange was very warm, and you guys identified also that the bottle itself is also somewhat warm, right? So let's see if I can, how much time we got left? So see if I can start playing around with some of these colors here. The beautiful kind of turquoise coming up there. I'm just gonna go ahead and block in some lighter color. Also seeing that, get a little bit of cream in there. Well, the nice thing about pastels is that you can go back in afterwards and kind of, so I'm not worried about all my smudging on the outside because I can eventually go back and clean that up. I'm gonna go ahead and lay in some gray here. And there's a lot of beautiful detail in this. There's some greens, some beautiful greens in here. I'm just, what I'm doing is I'm collecting colors. And as I go about doing that, I can tell this is a lot deeper here. As I go about doing that, I'm continually asking myself, is this, am I getting warmer? Am I getting cooler? Am I getting too dark? Am I getting too light? And that's how I pick my colors. I pick my colors based on some decisions that I'm preliminarily making about, you know, what is the color that I'm actually looking at, right? We've got to put a little bit of a glow in there, right? And looks like we've got some coming here with my yellow. My orange is taking on a more orangey look. And let's see. Now this I'm kind of using an old kind of a brick red underneath here to give it that little bit of that shadow. And we've got some kind of thing going on here. It's like getting my orange in there. You guys are going to do an amazing job, better than me because I'm rushing. But again, I'm just, so what I'm trying to do is I'm just ever so slightly just trying to get the general vibe of the colors. And so when you guys do your still lives, and you'll see in the assignment there are a variety to pick from, or you can pick your own. The goal of it is not about realism, it's about matching the colors to the best of your ability. So I have more work to do on this. You can see I need to get some more of this kind of dark color moved in there. So if I were to compare this to that shadow, I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer. This part right here needs a lot more work. So does this. This looks much too light. So I can bring in some more color here to try to get this. Now I feel like I'm kind of getting there. And this, of course, is much darker down here. So I've got some more work to do, but what you can see is that I'm trying to get the colors of the orange to kind of match more or less the colors that are on the photo. Mainly what I'm looking for is tonal congruence, right? So like if you guys get it more or less there and it doesn't really look like, if the colors look good, it's a success in my view. I want you guys to be able to look at the images that I put up and identify like, yeah, you know, that's a little bit cool, that's a little bit warm, and so forth. That's the first step. And then we'll elaborate this with our colored pencils too. So I'm just going to add some more of this black. I usually don't use as much black, but I can't seem to find a real nice dark blackish kind of a blackish blue to throw in there that would work appropriately. That's not really there. So do you guys see how I'm working the colors in here? I'm making some really kind of local decisions. And then if you were to look at my colors that I picked, they kind of tonally go with the drawing or the image that I'm working on. Now up here, what I would do, I would take a bunch of time and splash in on this stoneware vase and really kind of give it some time. There's some little bits of green, beautiful green in there, very subtle, but it's there. Little pieces of little bits of green in here too. Not black all the way. And I am seeing a little bit of green coming up there, a little bit of green right here. And use your fingers, you know, go for it. This one definitely needs much more blue going on up in here. You can tell. So I'm being kind of fast and sloppy, but what I'm doing, what the goal of this assignment, you guys, is to get you to not to learn to, like we've been drawing with pencils, we've been drawing with charcoal, ink. The goal is to try to get as close to the colors in the still life as you can. That's the real goal for me, for you, because I feel like once you can identify the colors, then drawing in color is not as hard. I think half of the battle is really trying to figure out what colors am I looking at, what are their analogs in my kit that I have. And you're not going to have all the perfect amount of colors, but I want you to try to get as close as you can. And again, you're all going to have your own style. Like I have my own kind of scribbly style here. Okay. Looks like we've got some light there, light there, light there. Yeah. I think I don't have my white, but. And then, of course, I can come in here and just kind of fill all this in with gray, get rid of all my messiness. So you can see how messy it gets. I'm using the side of my chalk to, as I go over my background, I can kind of clean up the edges. Okay. Once you get your background in there, things really start to come together. It does really have edge on. And there's not really anything there. So not quite, but in this like 30 minutes of what I've been doing here, just trying to give you guys an idea of how to kind of use your chalks different ways to just approximate the colors that you're seeing. And that's really the goal. I'm not looking for perfect drawings. I'm looking for like a really intense effort at trying to locate those colors that you're seeing. And also learning the kit that you have and realizing that, you know, your kits, while you might think you can mix any color if you just have the primaries, that's not true. You need certain primaries and you need certain tones. You need certain other ones that you can use. Let's see if I can. Okay, not the greatest, but you know, you can kind of get the idea. I've just tried to match the colors, and it really is a lot of fun. Don't beat yourself up if it doesn't, like, you know, come out the way you really want, but it's super fun playing around with the colors. You know, you can blend it again with your fingers and just kind of give it any kind of soft. You can play around with a real sharp edge, and then some kind of more blended effects if you want. Yeah, and the more you work it, the more colors that you'll end up getting in your drawing, and it'll look cool, and you guys will really dig it. So yeah, I mean, I'm having fun, so I could probably just keep going and going and going. Looks like I have some more kind of work to do down in here to give this orange some more kind of shadowy life, more, you know, oomph. Oh my God, that really fell apart. Whoops. Okay, well, that happened. So anyways, guys, that's your mission. Look for the assignment tomorrow morning. And again, I just want you to try to use your chalks to get a little semblance of the colors that you're seeing in the still life that you picked. Again, I'm not looking for a mirror image. I'm just looking for an approximation. So if I got this drawing from one of you guys based on this, I would say you tonally, that looks great. You know, you've got it more or less there, and, you know, good effort. So, so on Wednesday, guys, what I'd like to do is look at your 3/4 portrait, and then also any progress that you are making on your chalk. And maybe what we can do is do a more lengthy draw along with you guys on Wednesday with the chalk, and kind of I'll spend more time and I'll be more strategic, and I'll give you guys some more tips. And look at how messy everything already got. So just be mindful that your roommates are probably going to hate you when they have red chalk in their mac and cheese. So all right, guys, so that's what I've got for the day. Any questions for me? Any questions for me as I float in the blurriness of my background? Nope. Okay, guys, so I'm gonna head out. Definitely try to get some chalk and you know, try an experiment. And then if you can have some chalk by Wednesday, we could do a draw along, and then we can share screen. You can show me what colors you have and that kind of thing, and different techniques on how to get to where you're going. All right. Okay, guys, see you Wednesday. Take care.